Hello, and thank you for joining us again at Voice of Rohingya Radio. We are a registered nonprofit coming to you from the state of Oregon in the United States of America. We'd like to remind you to take a moment and join our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's an easy way to show your support for the program, and it allows us to continue providing the latest news through our exclusive interviews, reports from inside the border, and reputable sources from around the world. Voice of Rohingya Radio is the only news source of its kind in the English-speaking world, bringing you the latest news in a convenient format and keeping you informed and involved. You can listen to our program every week, Sundays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, by logging on to our Facebook or YouTube page, where we'll keep you up to date with our past and future programs. It is January 18th, 2014. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, I am your host, Zach Taylor. In our top story tonight, U.S. and UN diplomats on human rights wrapped up separate visits to Myanmar on Friday, with warnings that discrimination against religious minorities in the predominantly Buddhist nation is stoking already dangerous sectarian tensions. At a news conference concluding his six-day visit, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Tom Malinowski said Myanmar's leaders were at risk of provoking ethnic and religious conflict in their treatment of minorities and urged rejection of proposed laws that would limit interfaith marriage and religious conversion. We expressed a concern that the use of religion, in particular, to divide people, whether it is done for political or any other purposes, is incredibly dangerous, particularly in an election year, Malinowski told reporters. A UN General Assembly resolution in November urged the government of Myanmar to grant citizenship to the Rohingyas. The resolution has been denounced by Buddhist nationalists as interference in their country's domestic affairs with the intent to impose Islamic culture and religion in Myanmar. The United Nations Special Envoy for Myanmar, Yang Hee Lee, also wrapped up a 10-day tour of the country, including a visit to Rakhine State and a camp hosting displaced Rohingyas. As Lee spoke to reporters in Yangon on Friday, hundreds of Buddhist monks in crimson robes chanted in protest against the UN official, who they see as an advocate for the Rohingyas. Malinowski pointed to continuing arrests of political opponents and sectarian clashes between the Buddhist-dominated army and ethnic minorities in Kachin, Shan, and Rakhine states as indications that the reforms announced 4 years ago are losing momentum. Lee warned that if the bills aimed at thwarting religious conversion or intermarriage are passed, as they are expected to be soon by the Buddhist-dominated legislature, that it could be viewed as one of the indicators of backtracking in the political reform process. Over the course of her 10-day trip, following up on an earlier trip to the country in July, she met with a wide cross-section of political and civil society actors, including activists, journalists, ethnic and religious leaders, and government officials. She visited Insane Prison in Rangoon, where she met with prominent activists arrested in December for protesting the Chinese-backed Lat Pe Dong copper mine in central Burma. She traveled to Burma's restive Arakan state, the site of resurgent communal clashes since 2012, echoing the sentiments of other high-level UN envoys to Burma over the past year, including UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon. Lee claimed that an undue focus on terminology has stalled progress on fundamental issues relating to humanitarian access and the acquisition of citizenship. There's many complexities involved in this, and I'm bringing to the public's attention that the fixation on the word has paralyzed any forward movement, she said. That does not mean negating one word or the other, because it is fundamentally right for people to self-identify. While she praised some recent developments in Arakan, including the resumption of frontline healthcare by MSF in December, she claimed the situation in the troubled state remains at a crisis stage, and that humanitarian access is still minimal and high risk. She also noted that while some of the inhabitants of Mae Ban IDP camp were granted citizenship through the government's pilot citizenship verification program, their living standards have not improved as they remain subject to onerous mobility restrictions. They remain inside the camp with minimum food rations, limited access to health care, and to other essential services, she said. The despair that I saw in the eyes of the people in Mae Ban IDP camp was heartbreaking, she added. Although she was promised access to the latest draft of the government's action plan for Arakan, a leaked earlier draft of which stirred outrage as it called for the deportation en masse of those failing to acquire citizenship through the verification process, she claimed it has not yet been delivered to her. Tom Malinowski said that the country risks being exposed to dangers that it is not prepared to face. Myanmar's government has introduced legislation that could curb interfaith marriage and limit religious conversion. The laws, which are expected to be passed soon by Parliament, are seen as especially discriminatory towards women and minorities. I am concerned that these 4 bills could inflame already existing tensions between religious groups, Lee said. I therefore strongly urge all parliamentarians to closely scrutinize these bills in full consultation with affected communities and to reject them in their entirety. International scrutiny of Myanmar's rights record is intensifying as it gears up for its first nationwide elections since the repressive junta ceded power in 2011. Changes to the constitution before the late 2015 vote appear increasingly slim, meaning that opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi will be unable to run for the presidency. Speaking on the rapporteur, extremist monk Uwarathu, who is well known to the world as the Burmese Bin Laden and has been coined by Time magazine as the face of Buddhist terror, organized a protest against Mrs. Yang Hee Lee's fact-finding mission on Friday. The protest took place at the Kie Thun Pagoda in Bahan Township in Yangon. The protest included anti-Muslim monks led by U Pemwaka and anti-Muslim activists led by Ne Myo Wai. In a speech he gave at the rally, Warathu said, quote, Mrs. Yang Hee Lee, you may be a big shot in the United Nations, but for our country, we regard your standards as those of a prostitute. Adding that, and I must warn the listeners of this language, if you like, you can give your ass to the Kalars, which is an offensive racial slur for dark-complected people, here referring to Rohingya, but we cannot give our country to Kalars. During Warathu's inflammatory speech, he claimed, those who create Rohingyas are our enemy. Those who support Rohingyas are our enemy. Those who propose Rohingyas are our enemy. Those who discuss Rohingyas are our enemy. On Warathu's Facebook page, he boasted about his role in the protest, writing that his speeches were the most severe, roughest, and toughest amongst all of the speeches given on that day. While the media focused on the arrival of the UN envoy to Myanmar last week, American millionaire philanthropist Mr. George Soros arrived on a low-key flying visit to check out refugee camps in Rakhine State on a fact-finding mission. After meeting with representatives of the Rohingya community at the Chatiram Hotel in Yangon on January 6, the chairman of Open Society flew to Sittwe on January 8, where he met with Rakhine State Chief Minister U Maung Maung On before visiting both Muslim and Rohingya Buddhist Rakhine refugee camps in Sittwe Township. In their meeting at the hotel, Mr. Soros and Mr. Christopher Stone, the founder and president of Open Society respectively, met with Rohingya representatives U Shui Maung, MP for Buthe-Dong, and former MP for Buthe-Dong U Kya Min, U Kya Hla Aung, a former attorney and Rohingya activist, and Da Wei Wei Nu, the director of the Women's Peace Network Arakan. U Shui Maung claimed there was proof that the Rohingya had lived in generations in the territory that is now Rakhine State. He referred to the report of Sub-Commissioner's Office of British Government from April of 1826 to highlight the population of 60,000 Arakanese Rakhines and 30,000 Rohingyas. The ratio was 2-to-1, he said. The MP said that the ratio remains today and claimed the Rohingya population in Rakhine State should now be 2.5 million, not the current 1 million given the expected growth in population. He said the missing populace had fled and are now living in Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Australia, UK, USA, and Canada. U Than Tun, an Emergency Coordination Center member, complained that the international community just wants to see and ask about the Bengali people, and we feel they have an unclear vision. Adding that he thinks the Muslim community and Mr. Soros have a network. After stating that Rakhines are peaceful people who respect coexistence, U Than Tun asked if Rohingya carry on like this, how can we believe them? Mr. Soros reportedly visited both Muslim Rohingya and Buddhist Rakhine refugee camps during his visit. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for tuning in to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a registered nonprofit from the state of Oregon in the United States of America, bringing you English language news concerning the Rohingya and other persecuted minorities in Myanmar. I am your host, Zach Taylor. A new $18 million project agreement has been signed between the International Organization for Migration and the Bangladeshi government to support refugees from Burma, the vast majority of whom are Rohingya Muslims. The project will provide humanitarian assistance to the undocumented Myanmar nationals and vulnerable host communities in 2 districts of Cox's Bazar, a city in the southeastern corner of Bangladesh, close to the border with Burma, and one of the least developed districts in Bangladesh, according to Pepi Siddique, IOM Project Development Officer. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has expressed concern for the welfare of up to 500,000 undocumented Burmese migrants in the region, over 99% of whom are Rohingyas from neighboring Arakan state who have fled persecution and violence. Both UMNs in Bangladesh and the host populations are extremely vulnerable, with below national average access to healthcare, clean water, and sanitation, and a very high prevalence of malnutrition. Speaking to DVB on Monday, Siddique said that while the needs difference does not vary much between the 2 different populations, the Burmese refugees to the area have very limited access to the formal economy and hence their livelihood options are limited. Sarat Dash, IOM's chief of mission in Bangladesh, called the support very significant and thanked the government and international community for the faith in IOM to provide sustained humanitarian assistance. In other news, more than 1,500 Rohingya refugees are now living in temporary tents in Jammu, the winter capital of restive Jammu and Kashmir, India's only Muslim-majority state. In Jammu, they have no citizenship, no jobs, no school, and no proper health care. Without doctors, the refugees are left to treat their illnesses through faith healers. They lack even the most basic shelters to protect them from the heat and cold. Mud inundates shelters during the rainy season, as does dust during the summers. There, women are working as daily wage maids in houses across the city, leaving the children to fend for themselves with no school or protection. "We will not return to Myanmar," said one refugee, echoing a view heard across the refugee settlement. "The Myanmar government says we are stateless people. We don't want our children to face what we have had to face there." According to the State Affairs Office, 1,621 people belonging to 381 Rohingya families are living in tents in Jammu. Of these, 1,500 are registered with the UNHCR, which allows them to live in a South Asian country as refugees. A state Home Department official who did not wish to be named admitted there were no budgetary allocations to take care of the refugees. "They are not eligible for state benefits because they do not belong to the state," he said. 20 Muslims accused of having links with terrorists have been sentenced to 7 to 14 years in prison following a 5-month trial that their lawyer has described as biased and without evidence. 15 men and 4 women were sentenced to 14 years each, while a boy under 15 years old was given a 7-year sentence, according to the defendant's lawyer. One of the men, Thane Zah, also faces an additional sentence of 5 years for an immigration offense. They were given the maximum sentence, even though no one could provide evidence that they have links to terrorists, said attorney Thane Shui. The 20 convicted Muslims were arrested in August while traveling to a wedding in Shan State. The bride, her mother-in-law, her sister-in-law, and their cook were among those sentenced on Monday. Thane Shui said that his clients were not carrying any weapons and bore no evidence of links with terrorists, suggesting that they had been profiled based on their appearance and religion. What police seized from them were foods and materials for making biryani, he said. Shui, who said that the group will appeal the verdict next week, claimed that the judicial proceedings had been tampered with by Buddhists affiliated with the nationalist group 969, who he said attended most hearings and harassed the families of the accused. In other news, displaced persons living in camps near Rakhine State told the visiting UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights last week that they wanted documents to allow them to leave the camps. "Whether they call me Bengali or Rohingya, what I need is a citizenship card," said Da Cho, 49, who is active in women's affairs in an IDP camp in Maeban Township. Rakhine MP Oong Win said freedom of movement has been restricted for security reasons. "Intercommunal tensions are still high, and we need to have time to build trust," he said, adding that the Muslim community's insistence on the use of the term Rohingya exacerbated the issue. Under a government pilot project, more than 1,000 people applied for citizenship last September, of which 209 have been granted full or naturalized citizenship under the 1982 law, including 40 identified as Bengalis and 169 as Kaman. At last count, there were more than 140,000 internally displaced Rohingya in camps throughout Rakhine State. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a weekly news program bringing you up-to-date information about the Rohingya people in Myanmar. You can catch our broadcasts every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time here in the United States at youtube.com/VOR Radio, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on the program. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, this is Zach Taylor, signing out.